I'm standing in front of a freshly dug grave, my hands shaking as I hold the last letter my grandmother Ruth ever wrote me. I found it 263 days after she died, right next to evidence that could send a man to prison for 18 years. But let me tell you how I got here. 3 months ago, I had nothing. No family, no home, no idea that somewhere in Montana, a woman I'd never met had been fighting for me her entire life. My name is Sarah. I'm 22 years old. And this is the story of how I went from having $15 in my pocket to uncovering a conspiracy that had been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. It starts on my birthday, the worst birthday of my life. I stood at the iron gates of Riverside Youth Home in Portland, Oregon, watching them swing open for the last time. 22 years old. That's the age when the state stops caring what happens to you. The age when you're no longer their problem. The age when you're completely alone. Ms. Patterson, the director, handed me an envelope. Inside was $127. Everything the state of Oregon thought I was worth after 18 years in their system. "I wish we could do more, honey," she said. Her eyes were kind but tired. She'd said goodbye to hundreds of kids like me. Kids who aged out. Kids who walked through those gates with everything they owned in a backpack and nowhere to go. "Did anyone ever ask about me?" I heard myself say. "When I was a baby, anyone at all?" Miss Patterson's face fell. She'd answered this question before. "No records. Sarah, you were found at a hospital. Someone left you in the emergency room when you were about 3 months old. No note, no family ever came." I nodded. I had known this, but some small part of me always hoped maybe I'd remembered wrong. Maybe there was someone. There wasn't. Ms. Patterson pressed something else into my hand, a small envelope different from the first. "This came 2 weeks ago," she said, "from a lawyer in Montana. I was going to forward it to wherever you ended up, but you're here now." Montana. I'd never been to Montana. Didn't know anyone there. I took the envelope, hugged Ms. Patterson goodbye, and walked through those gates. Behind me, Riverside Youth Home stood like it always had, brick and concrete and barred windows. The only home I'd ever known. I didn't look back. The Greyhound station was 4 blocks away. I sat on a plastic chair and opened the envelope with shaking hands. The letterhead read, "Howard Chen, Attorney at Law, Missoula, Montana. Dear Ms. Sarah, I am writing to inform you that you have been named as the sole beneficiary in the estate of Ruth Henderson, who passed away on March 5th of this year. Ms. Henderson was your maternal grandmother. The estate includes 87 acres of land, a residential property, and financial assets totaling approximately $18,000. As the sole heir, all of this now belongs to you. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss the transfer of assets. Sincerely, Howard Chen." I read it 3 times. Grandmother, Ruth Henderson. I rolled the name around in my mind. It meant nothing. I'd never heard it before in my life. My phone was down to 12% battery. I pulled up Google and typed in the name. Nothing came up. No obituary, no social media, no trace that Ruth Henderson had ever existed except for this letter in my hands. 87 acres, a house, $18,000. It had to be a mistake. People like me don't inherit things. We don't have grandmothers who leave us land and money. We have nothing and no one. But the letter looked real. The law office had a website. Howard Chen's photo showed a kind-looking older man with graying hair. I checked the bus schedules. Portland to Seattle, $23. Seattle to Missoula, $89. $112 total. That would leave me with 15. I bought the tickets. The bus ride took 22 hours. 22 hours of watching the world transform outside my window. The green forests of Oregon gave way to the mountains of Washington, then Idaho, then finally Montana with its endless sky and rolling plains that seemed to go on forever. I slept in short bursts, my backpack clutched against my chest. Everything I owned was in that bag. 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, the book Miss Patterson had given me when I turned 16, a photograph of me at age 7, the only picture I had of myself as a child. That was it. 22 years of life fit into one worn backpack. As the bus rumbled through the darkness, I kept thinking about the letter. Ruth Henderson, my grandmother. Why had I never heard of her? If she existed, if she knew about me. Why hadn't she ever come? Why had she waited until she was dead to reach out? The questions spun through my mind until finally, somewhere past the Idaho border, I fell into a dreamless sleep. I woke to the driver calling out, "Willowbrook, Montana." The bus pulled into a town so small I almost missed it. One main street, a general store, a diner, a gas station, a sign that read Population 891 in faded letters. I stepped off the bus into air so clean and cold it shocked my lungs. Spring in Montana felt like winter in Portland. I pulled my Riverside Youth Home hoodie tighter around me and looked around. Everyone was staring. A town this small, a stranger stands out, especially a stranger who looked like me. Red hair tangled from the bus ride jeans with holes worn through actual use, not fashion, a backpack that had seen better days. I walked to the general store. A bell chimed as I opened the door. The man behind the counter looked up. He was maybe 65 with weathered skin and kind eyes. "Help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for Howard Chen, the lawyer." His eyebrows rose. "Howard's office is upstairs, but he's probably at Mabel's for lunch right about now." "Mabel's?" He pointed across the street. "The diner. Can't miss it." I thanked him and left. Crossed the empty street to a building with a hand-painted sign that read, "Mabel's Diner. Breakfast all day." Inside smelled like coffee and frying bacon. A handful of people sat in red vinyl booths. All of them turned to look at me. An older Asian man in a cardigan sat alone by the window. He glanced up from his newspaper and froze. "Sarah," he said. I blinked. "How did you—" "You look just like her." He stood up, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Please, sit down." Howard Chen had a gentle face and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He pushed them up as I sat. "I've been hoping you'd come," he said. "After I sent the letter, I wasn't sure. A lot of young people wouldn't travel this far on the word of a stranger." "I didn't have anywhere else to go," I said honestly. Something sad flickered across his face. "Ruth thought you might say that." "Who was she?" The question came out harder than I intended. "Who was Ruth Henderson?" Howard folded his hands on the table. "She was your grandmother, your mother, Rebecca's mother." "Rebecca? I'd never known my mother's name." "Ruth moved to Willowbrook in 1973, Howard continued. "Bought the land, built the house, raised Rebecca there. When Rebecca died," he paused. "When your mother died, Ruth spent everything she had trying to find you." "Find me? I was in the system. I wasn't hidden." "The system isn't always easy to navigate, especially for a 70-year-old woman living alone in rural Montana." Howard pulled a photograph from his folder and slid it across to me. I looked down and felt the air leave my lungs. The woman in the photo was maybe 70, with silver hair pulled back in a braid. She stood in front of a white house with a green roof, smiling at the camera. She had my eyes. The same blue-green that looked gray in certain light. The same pattern of freckles across her nose. The same way of tilting her head slightly to the left. "She looks like me," I whispered. "You look like her," Howard corrected gently, "and like your mother. The resemblance is striking." I couldn't stop staring at the photo. This woman, this stranger, was family. Real, actual family. "Ruth knew about you from the time you were 3 years old," Howard said. "She hired private investigators. It took them months, but they found you at Riverside." My head snapped up. She knew where I was. She tried to get custody, made applications to social services, but they denied her. She was 71, living alone on a farm, no spouse. "They said you were better off in the system where you could be properly cared for." The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. "So she wrote to you instead," he continued, "every month for 18 years. The world tilted. "What?" "She wrote you letters, every birthday, every Christmas, every month in between sometimes. Sent them to Riverside." I shook my head. "I never got any letters. Not one." Howard's expression was grave. "I know, they were all returned, every single one." He pulled out another folder. This one was thick, bulging with papers. "She kept them all," he said softly. "Every letter that came back. She didn't know if you'd ever see them, but she couldn't bring herself to throw them away." My hands were shaking. "Where are they?" "Wow." "At the farm, in a safe. Ruth left very specific instructions. Everything, the land, the money, the letters, all of it goes to you." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Why didn't she keep trying?" I heard myself ask. "Why didn't she come get me?" "She did try, for years. But the system is designed to protect children, and sometimes that means keeping them away from family that loves them." Howard's voice was quiet. "Ruth never stopped fighting. She just ran out of time. The diner was too small, too warm, too full of people I didn't know in a town I'd never been to, talking about a grandmother I'd never met." "Can I see it?" I asked. "The farm." Howard checked his watch. "I can take you right now." We drove in his old pickup truck through winding roads that cut through pine forests and open fields. The sky was so big here, so impossibly blue. Ruth was a good woman, Howard said as we drove. Kept to herself mostly. But when someone in town needed help, she was always there. Food for families struggling, money for medical bills. She didn't have much, but she shared what she had. What happened to my mother? The question had been building in my throat. Howard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Rebecca died when you were 6 months old. Car accident on Highway 91. Ruth never really recovered from losing her. 22 years. My mother had been dead for 22 years. We turned onto a dirt road marked by a wooden sign so faded I could barely read it, Henderson Farm. The road wound through overgrown fields. Apple trees twisted with age lined the drive, their branches heavy with new spring leaves. Then the house came into view. White walls, green metal roof, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs, flower boxes under the windows empty now, but waiting for summer blooms. Behind it stood a large red barn, paint faded but structure solid. It looked like something from a postcard, like the kind of home I used to imagine when I was little before I learned to stop imagining. Howard parked and handed me a set of keys. "It's yours, Sarah, all of it." I climbed out slowly. The air smelled like pine and grass and something sweet I couldn't name. The porch steps creaked under my feet. The key turned smoothly in the lock as if the house had been waiting for me. Inside was clean, surprisingly clean for a house that had been empty for 3 months. "I hired someone to maintain it," Howard explained, seeing my expression. "Used some of the estate funds. I hope that was all right." The living room had hardwood floors and a stone fireplace. Furniture simple but well made, quilts draped over the couch. And on every surface photos. Photos of a little girl with red hair, a teenager smiling at graduation, a young woman in her 20s standing in front of this very house. My mother, Rebecca Henderson. I moved through the house in a daze. The kitchen had been Ruth's workspace, canning jars lined up on shelves, recipes written in faded ink. The bedroom upstairs was simple, a quilt on the bed, a rocking chair by the window, and on the nightstand a photograph in a silver frame, Ruth holding a baby with red hair. Me. "She kept this by her bed," Howard said quietly from the doorway. "She looked at it every night." I picked up the frame with shaking hands. I couldn't have been more than 3 months old in the photo. Ruth looked younger here, maybe in her 50s, smiling down at baby me with such love it hurt to see. "When was this taken?" I whispered. "Before social services took you. Ruth had you for 3 days after Rebecca died. Then they said she was too old, too alone. They took you to Riverside." His voice was heavy. "She never stopped fighting to get you back." I set down the frame carefully and noticed something else. A wooden box on the dresser, simple but beautiful with my name carved into the lid. Inside was a key, brass old, attached to a note. "For Sarah, the truth is in the barn. Ruth." "I should let you explore on your own," Howard said, "but call me if you need anything. I'm serious, anything at all." After he left, I stood in the silence of my grandmother's house. My house now. The truth is in the barn. I walked outside as the sun began to set. The red barn stood solid against the darkening sky. The door opened with a creak. Inside was dark, dusty. Farming equipment I didn't recognize lined the walls, hay bales stacked in corners. And in the very back, partially hidden by a tarp, was a safe, an old-fashioned safe with a keyhole that looked like it would fit the brass key in my pocket. My hands shook as I inserted the key. The lock turned with a solid click. Inside were stacks and stacks of envelopes, hundreds of them, all addressed to me, all stamped "Return to Sender, Addressee Unknown." I pulled one out at random. The postmark read July 15, 2010, my 7th birthday. Inside was a card with balloons on it. Ruth's handwriting, "My dearest Sarah, happy 7th birthday, my angel. I wish I could be there to see you blow out your candles. I sent you a doll with red hair, like yours. Did you get it? I think about you every single day. I hope you know you're loved. Forever, Grandma Ruth." I never got a doll, never got any of these letters. I pulled out another. Christmas 2014, another. My 13th birthday, another. Just a random Tuesday in 2019. 263 envelopes total. I counted them twice. 263 times my grandmother had reached out. 263 times the system had sent her love back unopened. I sank to the floor of the barn surrounded by letters and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. She'd never stopped trying, never given up, and I'd never known. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the sun to finish setting, long enough for the barn to fill with shadows. The sound of an engine made me look up. Through the barn door, I saw headlights, a car pulling up to the house. Expensive car, black Mercedes. I stood wiping my eyes and walked to the barn door. A man stepped out, mid-50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than everything I owned. Silver hair, perfectly styled. He looked at the house, then at me, and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You must be Sarah," he called out. "I'm Dylan Drake. We need to talk about this property." He walked toward me with the confidence of someone who always got what he wanted. "I'm sorry about Ruth," he continued. "She was a stubborn woman. Refused a very generous offer for this land." I stayed silent watching him. "But you're young, smart. You understand the value of money." He pulled papers from his jacket. "I'm prepared to offer you $250,000. Cash. Sign today and you can start a new life anywhere you want. The land isn't for sale." His smile tightened. "You don't understand. This land sits on a water aquifer. My company has permits to extract from it. Ruth's refusal to sell was inconvenient. I'd hate for you to be inconvenient too." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. "Is that a threat?" "It's business advice." He stepped closer. "Your mother learned the hard way what happens to people who stand in the way of progress. I'd hate to see history repeat itself." My mother, Rebecca, who died in a car accident, except the way he said it. "What do you know about my mother?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Dylan's smile widened. "I know she made the wrong choice. I'm giving you the chance to make the right one." He set the papers on a hay bale. "You have 48 hours to sign. After that," he shrugged. "Well, Montana can be a dangerous place for young women alone." He walked back to his Mercedes. Before getting in, he turned back. "Ask the old-timers in town about me. Ask them what happens to people who say no to Dylan Drake." He drove away, leaving me standing in the barn doorway, my grandmother's letters scattered around my feet and a threat hanging in the Montana air. I looked down at the papers he'd left, then at the 263 letters. Ruth had fought him for 20 years. My mother had fought him too, and I was their legacy. I wasn't signing anything. But as I gathered the letters back into the safe, my hands were shaking. Not from sadness anymore, from fear. I woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains I'd never seen before in a bed that smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The letters. Ruth. The man who killed my mother. I sat up, my heart pounding. Dylan Drake's papers still sat on the kitchen table where I'd left them last night. 48 hours to sign. That was yesterday evening. I had maybe 44 hours left. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I got dressed in the same jeans and hoodie I'd worn yesterday, the only clothes I had, and went downstairs. In the kitchen, I found coffee already made. A note on the counter in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Thought you might need this. Come to the diner when you're ready. Mabel. The woman from yesterday who'd looked at me like she'd seen a ghost." I poured coffee into a chipped mug and walked to the window. The morning light turned the overgrown fields gold. Dylan's threat echoed in my mind. "Ask the old-timers what happens to people who say no." I needed answers. The walk into town took 30 minutes. My legs ached from yesterday's travel, but the morning air was crisp and clean. It cleared my head. Mabel's diner was already half full when I arrived. Conversations stopped as I walked in. Small towns, everyone knew everyone's business. Mabel looked up from behind the counter. She was maybe 58, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that had seen too much. "Sit," she said, pointing to a booth in the back. "I'll bring you breakfast." I sat. A few minutes later, she appeared with a plate piled with pancakes, eggs, and bacon. More food than I'd seen at one time in months. "I can't pay for this," I said quietly. "Did I ask you to?" Mabel slid into the seat across from me. "Eat." I ate. I couldn't help myself. The food was warm and real and tasted like someone cared. Mabel watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're Rebecca's daughter," she finally said. It wasn't a question. I swallowed. "You knew my mother. We were best friends, from the time we were 12 until the day she died." Mabel's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. "Ruth was my friend too. When Rebecca died, Ruth was never the same. She spent everything trying to find you. Lawyers, investigators, fighting the system every way she knew how. Howard said someone kept blocking her." Mabel's expression darkened. "The Drakes. Dylan's family has owned half this county for 3 generations. They own the water rights, the mineral rights, half the businesses. When they want something to happen, it happens. When they want something buried, it stays buried. Why would they care about my mother? Because Rebecca was the only one brave enough to stand up to them. Mabel leaned forward. 22 years ago, Drake Industries applied for permits to extract water from the aquifer under this land. Millions of gallons a day. It would have destroyed the water table, killed every farm and well for miles. I set down my fork. Rebecca organized the opposition, got signatures, went to town meetings, made it impossible for them to push it through quietly. Mabel's voice dropped. 2 weeks before the final vote, she died. The permits went through 3 months later. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. You think they killed her because of water permits? I know they did. So does anyone in this town with half a brain. But knowing and proving are two different things. Mabel glanced toward the window. Dylan Drake walked into your house yesterday, didn't he? How did you? His car was seen on the road to your place. Sarah, you need to be careful. The Drakes don't make threats lightly. He said I have 48 hours to sign over the land. Mabel went very still. What did you tell him, Isham? I said no. For a long moment, Mabel just looked at me. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're just like your mother, just like Ruth. Stubborn as hell and twice as brave. She stood up. Come with me. There's someone you need to meet. We drove in Mabel's old sedan, heading away from town on dirt roads that seemed to lead nowhere. After 20 minutes, we turned onto an even smaller track. A trailer sat in a clearing, old but well-maintained. Chickens scratched in the yard. A vegetable garden grew in neat rows. An old man sat on the steps whittling something from a piece of wood. He looked up as we approached. His face was deeply lined skin weathered from decades in the sun, but his eyes were sharp. Virgil, Mabel called out. This is Sarah, Rebecca's daughter. The knife stopped moving. Virgil stood slowly, his gaze never leaving my face. Lord have mercy, he whispered. You're the image of your mother. My throat tightened. Everyone kept saying that. This woman I never knew, whose face I apparently wore like a mask. You saw what happened to my mother, I said. The police report says you witnessed the brake lines being cut. Virgil's face went hard. I saw 2 men working under her car the night before she died. Didn't think much of it at the time, thought maybe she'd ask for help with something. But when I heard about the crash, he shook his head. I went to the police, told Chief Matthews exactly what I saw. He wrote it all down. Then what happened? He buried it, said there wasn't enough evidence, said I probably misremembered, said a lot of things that added up to shut up and forget about it. Virgil's hands clenched. Drake owns Matthews, owns half the county officials. Your mother knew that. That's why she was fighting them. Howard said Ruth tried to reopen the case. For 20 years, every time she got close, paperwork would disappear. Witnesses would suddenly change their stories. Matthews would claim there was nothing to investigate. Virgil looked at me with something like sorrow. Ruth died believing she'd failed. Failed Rebecca. Failed you. The words hit like a physical blow. But she didn't fail, Virgil continued. She left everything to you. The land, the evidence, the fight. She was hoping you'd finish what she and Rebecca started. What evidence? Dylan said he'd destroy me in court. Virgil and Mabel exchanged a look. Come inside, Virgil said. His trailer was small but immaculate. He led us to a closet in the back bedroom and pulled out a cardboard box. Ruth gave me this for safekeeping about a year before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I should give it to you if you ever showed up. He opened the box. Inside were folders, dozens of them. Ruth spent 2 decades building a case, Virgil said quietly. She documented everything. Every suspicious death, every family that lost their land after refusing to sell to Drake, every permit that got pushed through despite community opposition. I pulled out a folder at random. Inside were newspaper clippings, legal documents, handwritten notes in what I now recognized as Ruth's careful script. She was making a map, Mabel said softly, connecting the dots, showing the pattern. Another folder held photographs, farms that had been foreclosed, families forced to move, and in several photos the same black Mercedes in the background, Dylan Drake's car. How many? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 47 suspicious deaths or disappearances since 1995. Virgil said. All people who opposed Drake Industries in some way. All ruled accidents or suicides or natural causes. 47 people. My mother was just one of 47. Ruth tried to take this to the FBI, Mabel added, but she couldn't prove the connection. Everything was just circumstantial. Suspicious, but not proof. I kept digging through the box. At the bottom was a hand-drawn map of the county. Ruth had marked locations with red dots. So many red dots. And in the margin she'd written, "They can't hide forever. The truth will come out. I just pray I live to see it. RH." But she hadn't lived to see it. "There's more," Virgil said quietly. "At the farm, Ruth told me she had a room, a place where she kept the most important evidence, somewhere safe. Where? I don't know, she never told me, said it was better if only she knew in case Drake's people came asking questions. A secret room. Somewhere in the house I just inherited. I looked up at both of them. Why are you helping me? You could get hurt. Drake threatened me yesterday. He'll do the same to you." Mabel's face was fierce. "He's been threatening people in this town for 30 years. We're tired of being afraid." "Ruth was family," Virgil added simply. "And so are you." Family. The word still felt foreign on my tongue. "There's someone else you should meet," Mabel said, checking her watch. "She's been investigating Drake for years. She's got resources Ruth didn't have." 20 minutes later, we pulled up to a small house on the edge of town. A rental by the look of it. Temporary. The woman who answered the door was maybe 27, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore jeans and a Portland Tribune sweatshirt. "You must be Sarah," she said. "I'm Claire Novak. Come in." The house was clearly being used as an office. Papers covered every surface. A laptop sat open on the dining table, multiple windows displaying documents and spreadsheets. "I'm an investigative journalist," Claire explained, gesturing for us to sit. "I've been working on a story about Drake Industries for 3 years. Corporate malfeasance, environmental violations, suspicious deaths. It's all connected, but I haven't been able to prove it." She pulled out a folder and handed it to me. "Your grandmother contacted me 6 months ago. Said she had evidence that could blow the whole thing open. We were supposed to meet, but..." She paused. "She died 2 weeks before our scheduled appointment." I felt cold. "You think Drake killed her?" Ruth was 74 with a heart condition. The death certificate says natural causes, but the timing was awfully convenient. Claire's expression was hard. 3 days before she died, she sent me this. She turned her laptop around. On the screen was a scanned document. A letter in Ruth's handwriting. "Dear Ms. Novak, if you're reading this, I'm likely dead. I've gathered evidence against Drake Industries for 22 years, evidence of murder, corruption, environmental crimes. I've kept it hidden, but I can feel my time running out. I've left everything to my granddaughter, Sarah. If she comes to Willowbrook, please help her. She'll need someone who knows how to fight men like Dylan Drake. The evidence is in the house. She'll find it. Tell her I'm sorry I never got to meet her. Tell her she's loved. Ruth Henderson." My hands were shaking. "She knew she was dying," I whispered. "She'd been sick for months," Mabel said softly. "Didn't tell anyone. Just kept working. Kept building the case." Claire leaned forward. "Sarah, if we combine what I have, what Virgil has, and what Ruth left you, we might finally have enough. But we need to move fast. You said Drake gave you 48 hours. I nodded. "Then we have 48 hours to find that evidence and figure out how to use it." "He threatened to kill me," I said flatly, "like he killed my mother." "Then we need protection." Claire pulled out her phone. "I know someone, FBI agent, who's been trying to build a case against Drake for corruption. She's been waiting for a break like this. Will she help? If we can show her what Ruth collected, yes. But Sarah," Claire's expression was serious, "once we start this, there's no going back. Dylan Drake has connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. He's not going to let this go quietly." I thought about the 263 letters in the barn safe. About Ruth writing month after month, year after year, never knowing if I'd ever read them. About my mother, Rebecca, who died fighting men like Dylan Drake. About the 47 red dots on Ruth's map. 47 families destroyed. "I'm not going quietly either," I said. We drove back to the farm, all 4 of us. Mabel, Virgil, Claire, and me. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The house looked peaceful in the fading light, like nothing bad had ever happened here. But I knew better now. "Where do we start?" Claire asked as we went inside. "Ruth said it was hidden," I replied, looking around with new eyes. "A room, somewhere safe." We split up. Mabel took the kitchen. Virgil searched the basement. Claire examined the bedrooms. I went back to Ruth's room. I'd been in here before, but I hadn't really looked. Now I studied every detail. The bed with its handmade quilt, the dresser with photos, the bookshelf full of well-worn paperbacks. On the nightstand sat a music box I hadn't noticed before, old, made of dark wood with a small silver key in the lock. I turned the key. The mechanism clicked, and a soft melody began to play. Beethoven. For Elise. The music box opened to reveal a small compartment. Inside was a photograph and a folded piece of paper. The photograph showed three women, a young Ruth, maybe 30, holding a baby. Beside her stood a teenage girl, Rebecca, my mother. And the baby had red hair and blue-green eyes. Me, the three of us together. The only photo that existed of all three generations. My vision blurred with tears. The paper was a note in Ruth's handwriting, or, "If you found this, you're in my room, looking for answers. The answers are below you." Literally. Under the bed is a loose floorboard, third plank from the headboard. Inside is a key. It opens a door in the barn you haven't found yet. Be brave, my darling girl. Finish what we started. I love you, Grandma Ruth. My hands shook as I knelt beside the bed, pushed it aside, counted the floorboards, third from the headboard. I'd pried it up with shaking fingers. In the hollow beneath was a small brass key on a ribbon. "I found something," I called out. The others came running. "What is it?" Claire asked. "Just." I held up the key. Ruth left instructions. There's a door in the barn. We ran outside the setting sun, painting long shadows across the yard. The barn loomed ahead, red paint faded to rust in places. Inside, the space was vast and dim. Old farming equipment lined the walls, hay bales stacked in one corner. The smell of dust and wood and time. "A door," Virgil muttered, running his hands along the walls. "Hidden door. Where would Ruth hide a door?" Mabel was examining the floor. "Here, these boards are newer. See different wood." We pulled aside hay bales, revealing a trapdoor set into the floor. It had a small brass lock. I inserted the key. It turned smoothly. The door swung open, revealing stairs descending into darkness. Claire pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight. "Anyone else think this is like a horror movie?" "Ruth wouldn't hurt us," Mabel said firmly. "Come on." We descended single file. The stairs led down about 12 feet into a room I never could have imagined. The walls were completely covered with documents, photographs, maps, news clippings. String connected different pieces, creating a web of information that filled the entire space. In the center of it all was a large map of the county. Red dots marked locations, dates written beside each one, names, and at the top in Ruth's careful handwriting, Dylan Drake's victims, 1994. 47 red dots. My mother's name was the seventh. My God. Claire whispered, her phone camera already out documenting everything. This is incredible. Filing cabinets lined one wall. Virgil opened the first drawer. Inside were folders meticulously labeled. Financial records, property transfers, death certificates, autopsy reports that didn't match the official causes of death. "Ruth must have spent years collecting all this," Mabel said, awe in her voice. Against the back wall stood a desk. On it sat an old cassette player and a box of tapes. Each tape was labeled with a date. I picked up one at random. October 17, 2019. Conversation between Dylan Drake and unknown male. "She recorded phone calls," I said. Claire was already by my side. "Play it." I pressed play. Static, then voices. "Need it handled cleanly. No questions." That was Dylan Drake. I'd recognize his cold voice anywhere. "Same as the others," another man's voice, rougher. "Exactly the same. Make it look like an accident. Equipment malfunction. The guy's a farmer, plenty of dangerous machinery around." "What about the family?" "They'll sell after he's gone. They always do." The recording clicked off. We stood in silence. "She recorded him," Claire breathed. "She actually recorded him ordering hits." "But we already have the letters," I said, confused. "The 263 letters from the safe. We can—" "No," Virgil interrupted gently. "Sarah, those letters prove Ruth loved you. But they don't prove Dylan killed anyone. These tapes do. This is different evidence." I understood then. The letters were about love. The tapes were about justice. "How many recordings?" I asked. "At least 30, Virgil said, counting through the cassettes. Claire was already photographing every tape, every label, every document on the walls. "This is it. This is what Ruth spent 20 years collecting. With these recordings, the financial documents, the pattern of deaths, we can take this to the FBI. We can finally—" A crash from above cut her off. Smoke began filtering down into the hidden room. Thick, black, acrid. "Fire!" Mabel screamed. We ran up the stairs. The barn above was already engulfed in flames. The fire had spread impossibly fast. Too fast. This wasn't an accident. "This way," Virgil shouted, leading us toward a side door. We burst out into the night. The barn was a tower of flames behind us, heat pressing against our backs like a physical force. In the driveway sat Dylan Drake's black Mercedes, and Dylan himself, standing beside it, phone to his ear, smiling. When he saw us emerge, he lowered the phone. "I gave you 48 hours, he called out. "You should have taken the deal." "You're destroying evidence of your own crimes," Claire shouted back. Dylan laughed. "What evidence? I don't see any evidence. Just an old barn burning down. Tragic, really. These old structures, they're fire hazards." The barn collapsed inward with a roar. Sparks flew up into the night sky like dying stars. All of Ruth's work, 20 years of evidence, gone. "You have 6 hours now," Dylan said, walking toward his car. "Sign the papers and leave Montana, or the house is next, with you in it." He drove away, taillights disappearing into the dark. We stood there, covered in soot, watching the barn burn. "We lost everything," Mabel said quietly. "No." Claire was checking her phone, swiping frantically. "I got photos, hundreds of them, before the fire. Every document on those walls, every tape label, every connection Ruth made. And I grabbed this." Virgil pulled something from his jacket, a USB drive. "Found it on the desk in the hidden room. Must have backups of something." Hope flickered in my chest. "The tapes are gone," I said. "But if Ruth made digital copies?" "There's only one way to find out," Claire said. We went back to the house, to Ruth's room. I pulled out my laptop, the ancient one from the youth home, and plugged in the USB. Files, hundreds of files, audio recordings, scanned documents, photographs. Ruth had digitized everything. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew Drake might try to destroy the physical evidence. So she made copies." Claire was already on her phone. "I'm calling my FBI contact. We need protection, and we need it now." As she walked away to make the call, I scrolled through the files. So much information, so much proof. And then I found a folder labeled simply, "For Sarah." Inside was a single document, a letter. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, you found the evidence room. You've seen what I spent 20 years building. I'm sorry I have to leave this burden to you. Sorry I couldn't finish it myself. But I'm not sorry I fought. And I'm not sorry I left you this land, because you're stronger than you know, sweetheart. You survived 22 years alone. You'll survive this too. Dylan Drake thinks he's untouchable, but he's wrong. Because now you have something he doesn't, the truth. And people who love you. Finish what your mother and I started. Make them pay. Not for revenge, but for justice. For the 47 families destroyed. For the land poisoned. For the system corrupted. And when it's done, live here. Plant a garden, watch the sunsets, build the life Rebecca and I never got to give you. You are loved, Sarah. You always were. I wish I could have held you. Just once, but I'll be with you in every sunrise. In every apple from the orchard. In every room of this house. Be brave, my darling girl. Forever your Grandma Ruth. P.S. There's one more thing in the music box. A hidden compartment. I hope it brings you joy. Or I ran back to Ruth's room, opened the music box again. There in a hidden compartment I'd missed before was a silver bracelet. Engraved on it, "To Sarah with all my love. Mom Rebecca." My mother had made this for me before she died, and Ruth had kept it all these years. I fastened it around my wrist with shaking hands. Claire came back, her face grim. "My FBI contact is coming, Agent Maria Santos, but she can't get here until tomorrow afternoon. We need to stay alive until then." "Drake said 6 hours," Mabel reminded us. I looked at the bracelet on my wrist, at the letter still glowing on my laptop screen, at the 3 people who'd risked everything to help me. "Then we have 6 hours to make him think we're leaving," I said, "and to set a trap." The night was just beginning. The hours before dawn are the longest. That's what I learned that night. We sat in Ruth's kitchen, the 4 of us making a plan that would either save us or get us killed. Claire had her laptop open, uploading every file from Ruth's USB drive to a secure cloud server. "If something happens to us, this still gets out," she said. "I've got it set to auto-send to 5 different journalists if I don't check in every 12 hours. "Dylan doesn't know you got the files," Virgil said, pouring his 3rd cup of coffee. The bitter smell filled the kitchen. "He thinks everything burned in the barn." "Which gives us an advantage," Mabel added, her hands wrapped around her own mug. "He thinks we're helpless." I stared at my mother's bracelet, turning it around my wrist. The silver caught the lamplight. Outside, the darkness was absolute. No streetlights this far from town, just stars and the faint glow from the burned barn still smoldering. He said 6 hours, I said quietly. That was 4 hours ago. We have 2 hours until sunrise. What happens then? Claire closed her laptop with a soft click. My FBI contact agent Maria Santos is driving from Denver. She'll be here by 2 this afternoon if we can stay alive until then. That's a big if, Virgil interrupted. Drake has people, security contractors, enforcers. He could come at any time with any number of them. Then we make sure he comes when we're ready. I stood up surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. The fear was still there, coiled in my stomach like a snake, but I pushed it down. We bait him. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. How? Mabel asked. I pulled out my phone, the cheap one from the youth home, now down to 8% battery. I call him, tell him I'll sign, ask him to bring the papers at dawn. That's suicide, Claire said flatly. Not if the FBI knows he's coming, not if we record everything. I looked at her. Can your contact get here faster if she knows Drake is making his move? If she knows he's actively threatening me? Claire hesitated, then nodded slowly. She's been trying to catch him in the act for 2 years. If we can get him to threaten you on record to admit to anything. She pulled out her phone. I'll call her now. While Claire stepped outside to make the call, Virgil walked to the window. The first hints of dawn were touching the eastern horizon. Sun's coming up in 90 minutes. If Drake's smart, he won't come alone. He never does, Mabel said quietly, her face drawn. He has 2 men who work for him. Officially, they're security contractors. But everyone in town knows they're the ones who do his dirty work. The same 2 men who cut my mother's brake lines 22 years ago. The same ones who'd probably set the barn on fire last night. Good, I said. The words surprised me even as I said it. If they come too, they all go down together. Mabel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her palm was rough, calloused from years of work. You sound just like Rebecca, that same quiet steel. She was terrified the night before she died. I remember her calling me, saying she thought someone was following her. But she didn't back down. She went to that town meeting anyway. My throat tightened, and they killed her for it. They tried to break her spirit first, but they couldn't, and they won't break yours either. Claire came back in, her face flushed despite the cold. Agent Santos is mobilizing a team. She's calling in the Denver field office and the Montana State Police. But she needs probable cause to move on Drake immediately. She needs him to make a direct threat on record that gives her justification for an arrest. I'll get it, I said. Sarah, Mabel started. My mother died fighting him. Ruth spent 20 years gathering evidence. I'm not running. I picked up my phone. Someone find me Drake's number. Virgil pulled out his wallet, extracted a creased business card. The edges were worn like he'd looked at it many times over the years. He gave this to me when he tried to buy my land. Thought I'd eventually call him. Never did. The card was expensive stock, embossed lettering. Dylan Drake, CEO, Drake Industries. I dialed before I could change my mind. It rang 3 times, then his voice smooth even at 4:30 in the morning. Like he'd been expecting my call. I was wondering when you'd call. I'll sign, I said, forcing my voice steady, but I have conditions. A pause. I could almost hear him smiling. You're not in a position to make conditions, Sarah. I want $200,000. Cash. And a legal agreement that you won't touch any other property in this county for 10 years. He laughed. Actually laughed. Bold. I like it. But no. Then I'm not signing. Sarah. His voice changed, became almost gentle. Fatherly. It made my skin crawl. Do you know what happened to the last person who tried to negotiate with me? A farmer named Thomas Chen. 63 years old. His tractor rolled over on him. Terrible accident. Claire was already typing on her laptop. She pulled up a news article from 2018. Thomas Chen, 63, killed in farm accident. The 18th red dot on Ruth's map. I'm not scared of you, I lied. You should be. Your mother wasn't scared either. Right up until her brakes failed on Highway 91. He paused, letting it sink in. Did you know she called me that night about an hour before the crash? Said she was going to expose everything. I told her the same thing I'm telling you, walk away. She didn't listen. My hand tightened on the phone so hard I thought it might crack. Claire had pulled out a professional recording device, connected it to my phone with a cable. She was capturing everything. Keep him talking, she mouthed. You're confessing to murder, I said. I'm telling you a story. Stories aren't evidence, Sarah. Evidence is what burned in your barn last night. His voice hardened. You have two choices. Sign the papers and leave Montana with enough money to start over somewhere else, or refuse and join your mother and grandmother. Wait, grandmother, what about Ruth? I asked, my heart hammering. Heart condition. Very sad. Though I heard she was quite healthy until I had a conversation with her doctor about changing her medications. Fascinating what a little financial incentive can do. Claire's eyes went wide. She was getting all of this. You killed her too, I whispered. I eliminated obstacles. That's business. Your grandmother had 20 years to sell and retire comfortably. She chose to fight instead. She paid the price. His voice went cold. Now you're choosing the same path. Why do you think that will end differently? Because I'm not alone, I said. Ruth made copies of everything, digital copies. They're already uploaded, already sent to journalists and the FBI. If anything happens to me, it all goes public. Silence on the line, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, you're bluffing. Try me. I have recordings of you ordering hits, financial documents showing bribes to Chief Matthews' 3 county commissioners, 2 state senators, and a federal judge. Photos of your security contractors at every single death site. Ruth spent 20 years building this case, and it's all digital now. Untouchable. The barn burned. The barn was a decoy. Ruth was smart enough to know you'd try something like that. I was improvising now, but the lie felt good, powerful. She made backups, multiple backups, and they're all set to release if I don't check in every 12 hours. I could hear him breathing, calculating, probably trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. Bring the papers at dawn, I said before he could respond. 6 o'clock. Come alone. We'll talk. I don't do business with children who make threats. Then you'll do business with the FBI, because Agent Maria Santos is very interested in those recordings Ruth made, the ones where you order people killed. Should I play one for you, October 17th, 2019? You told someone to make a farmer's death look like an equipment malfunction. Enough. His voice was pure ice now, controlled fury. 6 o'clock. If you're smart, you'll have those papers signed and be ready to leave. If you're not well, Montana is full of dangerous places, especially for young women alone. Accidents happen, houses burn, people disappear. He hung up. I set down the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. You did it, Claire breathed. You got him to confess. On tape. Admitted to Rebecca's murder. Admitted to Ruth's murder. Implied he's going to kill you too. He admitted to bribing officials, Virgil added, his voice rough with emotion. After 22 years. After all this time, we finally have him on tape. Mabel wrapped her arms around me. I stood rigid for a moment, then collapsed into her embrace. The fear I'd been holding back crashed over me like a wave. He's going to kill me, I whispered into her shoulder. Just like Mom, just like Ruth. No, Claire said firmly, her hands still red with ink from writing down everything Drake had said. Because Agent Santos is getting a warrant right now based on this recording, and because she checked her watch 90 minutes, this place is going to be crawling with federal agents. Will they get here in time? My voice was small, childlike. They have to. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Claire coordinated with Agent Santos, sending the audio file, providing GPS coordinates, uploading Ruth's files as additional evidence. Virgil checked every lock on every door and window. Mabel made more coffee, her hands steady despite everything, a lifetime of diner work making her calm in crisis. I went to Ruth's room one more time, sat on her bed looking at the photographs. Ruth as a young woman, maybe 30, standing in front of this very house. My mother as a child, gap-toothed and grinning. Me as a baby, the one photo of all 3 of us together. 3 generations of women. 3 generations of fighters. I'm sorry I never met you, I said to the empty room. To the grandmother who'd loved me from a distance, who'd written 263 letters, who'd spent 20 years building a case against the man who killed her daughter. I'm sorry I came too late. The house settled around me, wood creaking in that way old houses do. Almost like it was answering, like Ruth was still here, somehow in the walls and the floorboards in the air itself. I picked up the music box, wound it again. Für Elise tinkled out, fragile and beautiful. In the hidden compartment where I'd found my mother's bracelet, there was something else I'd missed in my hurry. Another key, smaller than the barn key, brass with a number engraved on it, 237, a safe deposit box key. Claire, I called out. She appeared in the doorway instantly. What is it? I held up the key. Ruth had a safe deposit box, number 237. Where? I don't know, but Howard would. He was her lawyer, I thought frantically. It's not even 5 yet. The bank won't open until 9. Claire was already dialing. I'll wake him up. If Ruth hid something in a safe deposit box separate from everything else, it must be important. She called. Howard answered on the fourth ring, voice foggy with sleep. I could hear him through the speaker. Safe deposit box, he repeated clearly, confused. Yes, at First Montana Bank in Willowbrook. I have the other key in my files. But, Sarah, what's going on? We don't have time to explain, Claire said. Can you meet us there at 9 when it opens? Yes, of course, but thank you, Howard. We'll explain everything later. She hung up before he could ask more questions. Whatever Ruth kept in that box, I said slowly, she thought it was important enough to hide separately from everything else. The smoking gun, Claire said. It has to be. We don't know that. I know Ruth. The words came out before I could stop them. It was strange to say. I'd never met her, but I felt like I knew her now. Through her letters, her evidence room, her life's work. She was thorough, methodical. If she hid something separately, it's because it was the most important piece. A car engine in the distance. We all froze. Virgil appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Black Mercedes, coming up the drive. Fast. It was 5:45, 15 minutes early. Claire grabbed my arm. Agent Santos is still 25 minutes out minimum. You don't have to do this. We can hide. We can... No. I pulled away gently. He can't know you're here. If he sees you, he'll run, and we'll never get him. I'll stall until the FBI arrives. And if they don't arrive in time, Mabel asked, her voice breaking. I touched the bracelet on my wrist. My mother's bracelet. Felt the cool metal that had touched her skin 22 years ago. Then I guess I find out if I'm as brave as everyone thinks I am. They hid. Claire in the coat closet with her recording equipment. Mabel and Virgil in the basement, listening through the old heating vents that carried sound from the first floor. I stood on the porch as the Mercedes pulled up. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The burned-out shell of the barn smoked in the background, a monument to Drake's violence. Dylan Drake stepped out. He wasn't alone. 2 men emerged from the backseat. Both tall, both built like linebackers, both with the dead eyes of people who'd done terrible things for money. One had a scar running down his left cheek. The other was missing part of his right ear. These were the men who'd cut my mother's brake lines. I knew it in my bones. I thought I said, "Come alone," I called out, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I don't trust you," Drake replied, walking toward the porch. He wore yet another expensive suit, charcoal gray, this time perfectly tailored, like he was going to a business meeting. Like this was just another day. "Where are the papers?" "Inside." "Get them." "Not until we talk about the price." His expression darkened. "We had this conversation. You have no leverage. I have everything Ruth collected. 47 cases, audio recordings, financial records, proof of bribery reaching up to federal judges. I was making some of this up, extrapolating from what I'd seen, but his face told me I was close. That's worth more than 200,000. You're a foolish child. He climbed the porch steps, his men flanking him. They moved like predators. Professional. Dangerous. Your mother was foolish too. She thought righteousness would protect her. It didn't. No, you murdered her. I eliminated an obstacle. He was close now, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. Just like I've eliminated every other obstacle for 30 years. Did you really think you could threaten me? I own this county. I own the police, the courts, the politicians. You're nobody. A foster kid with delusions of heroism. I don't think I know. I pulled out my phone, hit play on the recording from our earlier call. His voice filled the morning air. Heart condition. Very sad. Though I heard she was quite healthy until I had a conversation with her doctor about changing her medications. His face went white, then red. That's not admissible in court. You recorded me without consent. Montana is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of. And even if I couldn't, I gestured to the trees where Claire had told me Agent Santos was positioning surveillance equipment. The FBI can. You're bluffing. How about this one? I played another clip. Your mother wasn't scared either. Right up until her brakes failed on Highway 91. Did you know she called me that night? Stop, he said quietly. Or this one. You talking about changing Ruth's medications. Admitting you killed her. Stop. One of his men grabbed my wrist fingers, digging in hard enough to bruise. The phone clattered to the porch. "Where is it?" Drake demanded, his face inches from mine. "The original evidence? Where did Ruth hide it?" "Like I'd tell you." The other man grabbed my other arm. I was trapped between them. "You have one chance," Drake said, his voice like ice. "Tell me where Ruth kept the originals. Tell me how to access her files. Or we make this look like a robbery gone wrong. A tragic end to a foster kid who had nowhere to go and decided to end it all. Happens more than you'd think." "You can't. I can do anything I want. I've done it 47 times. One more won't make a difference." His hand moved to my throat. Squeezed. Not hard enough to cut off air. Just enough to terrify. "Last chance, Sarah. Where are the files?" I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This was how I was going to die. Just like my mother. Just like Ruth. The man who'd killed them both was going to kill me too. And then freeze FBI agents poured from everywhere. From behind the house, from the trees lining the driveway. From vehicles that must have been positioned in the dark while we were talking. Agent Maria Santos came up the porch steps, weapon drawn, badge out. She was maybe 45, Latina, with steel in her eyes. "Dylan Drake, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and about 47 counts of manslaughter we're going to add as we go." Drake's hands dropped from my throat, but his expression didn't change. "Cool. Calculating. You have no proof. We have recordings, documents, testimony from multiple witnesses, and security footage from Riverside Youth Home in Portland showing you making inquiries about Sarah 3 weeks ago when you found out Ruth had died and left everything to her granddaughter." Santos smiled grimly. "You've been planning this from the moment you heard about the will." For the first time, I saw fear in Drake's eyes. "You've been planning to kill me since before I even knew Ruth existed." I said, the realization hitting me. "You knew Sarah would inherit," Santos continued, as agents cuffed Drake and his 2 men. "You knew about Ruth's evidence, so you decided to eliminate the problem before it became public. Burn the barn. Threaten the girl. Take the land. Simple. Except you didn't count on Ruth being smart enough to make backups." "I want my lawyer," Drake said. "You'll need several." Santos turned to me, her expression softening. "You okay, kid?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. My throat hurt where he'd grabbed me. Claire, Mabel, and Virgil emerged from their hiding places. Claire's recording device was still running, capturing everything. "Got every word," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. Santos smiled. "Good, because I'm betting when we start digging into Drake Industries' financial records, we're going to find a whole lot more than 47 victims." They led Drake to one of the FBI vehicles. As he passed me, he stopped. The agent holding his arm stopped too, allowing him one last word. "You didn't win," Drake said quietly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You just painted a target on your back. I have friends, powerful friends. They won't let this stand." "Bonnie," I stepped closer, looked him in the eye. "Then they'll go down too. Every single one of them. I've got 20 years of Ruth's evidence, the FBI on my side, and nothing left to lose. You took everything from me before I was even old enough to remember. My mother, my grandmother, 22 years of my life. You don't scare me anymore." "We'll see about that." "Move along," Santos said, pulling him toward the car. They drove him away. His 2 men went in separate vehicles. Suddenly, the yard was full of federal agents documenting everything, taking statements, processing the scene. Howard arrived looking shaken and confused. "Sarah, I heard sirens. What's happening?" "Dylan Drake just got arrested for murder," I said. "Multiple murders, including my mother and Ruth." Howard sat down heavily on the porch steps. "Good God." "Howard, Ruth had a safe deposit box, number 237. We need to get into it. Now." He looked up at me, understanding dawning. "You think there's more evidence?" "I know there is." By 9 o'clock, we were at First Montana Bank. The manager was called from his home, arrived fumbling with keys and looking terrified by the FBI vehicles parked outside. "I assure you we've done nothing wrong," he stammered to Agent Santos. "We're not here for you," she said. "We need access to safe deposit box 237. It's part of an active federal investigation." Box 237 was in the vault middle row. It took both my key and Howard's to open it. Inside was a single manila envelope. I lifted it out with shaking hands. It was sealed with wax stamped with Ruth's initials. "Open it," Santos said gently. I broke the seal. Inside were documents, legal papers, and a handwritten letter on top. The legal papers were adoption records. My adoption records. Except I'd never been adopted. "What?" I couldn't make sense of it. Howard took the paper's read quickly. His face went pale. "These are falsified," he said, his voice shaking. "They show that a couple named Robert and Linda Morrison adopted Sarah from Riverside Youth Home when she was 6 months old. But that never happened." "I know it didn't. I aged out of the system. I was never adopted." "Exactly." Howard flipped through the pages, his hands trembling. "Someone created fake adoption papers. Someone with access to official records. Someone who wanted to make it look like Sarah had been legally adopted and moved away. So Ruth would stop searching." "Who?" But even as I asked, I knew. Howard turned to the signature page, his finger trembling as it traced down to the notary seal. "Andrew Matthews, Chief of Police, Willowbrook, Montana. Drake's man, the one who'd buried my mother's murder investigation 22 years ago. He didn't just bury the evidence of Rebecca's death," Howard said quietly, his voice breaking. "He actively worked to keep Ruth from finding Sarah. To make her think Sarah had been adopted by a good family, that she was safe and happy, somewhere with people who loved her. So she'd stop looking," I whispered. "So she'd stop investigating Drake." Santos was already on her phone. "I need an arrest warrant for Andrew Matthews. Obstruction of justice, falsifying government documents, conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit murder." Ruth's letter was underneath. I unfolded it with numb fingers. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, you've found what I hid. The proof that they tried to steal you from me twice. Once when you were a baby, when they took you from my arms and said I wasn't fit to raise you. And again when they made me believe you'd been adopted, that you were beyond my reach. Safe with another family who would love you the way I wanted to. I spent 15 years believing that lie. 15 years living with the comfort and the pain of thinking you were somewhere out there being loved. Being raised by people who could give you what I couldn't. It wasn't until I hired new investigators in 2020 that I learned the truth. You'd never left Riverside. The adoption records were fake. You'd been there all along, just an hour away from me, close enough to reach. If only I'd known. When I found out what Matthews had done, I wanted to kill him. But I realized something better. I could build a case so airtight that he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. That's what this box represents. The final piece. Proof that Drake's corruption reaches into the very systems meant to protect children like you. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner, sweetheart. I'm sorry for every birthday I missed, every scraped knee I couldn't kiss better, every nightmare I couldn't chase away. I'm sorry for every moment we could have had together, but I'm not sorry I kept fighting. And I'm not sorry I'm leaving this fight to you, because you're strong enough to finish it. You always were. You survived 22 years thinking you were alone. You survived believing no one wanted you. You can survive anything. All my love across every year and every mile, Grandma Ruth P.S. There's one more thing. In the envelope, I reached back into the envelope, found a smaller one inside sealed. On it was written in different handwriting, "For Sarah's wedding day, with all my love, Mom." Inside was a ring, simple silver band with a small blue stone, aquamarine, my birthstone, and a note in younger, messier handwriting than Ruth's, "For my daughter Sarah. I hope she wears this when she finds someone who loves her the way she deserves. I hope she has the life I won't get to give her. I hope she knows she was wanted. Always. Rebecca, my mother's engagement ring, the one she must have been wearing when she died. Ruth had kept it all these years, saving it for me. For the day I'd get married, a day neither of them would see. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Howard wrapped me in his arms first. Then Mabel, then Virgil, then even Agent Santos, this tough FBI agent who'd seen everything, had tears in her eyes too. "Let's get you home," Santos said finally. Home. The White House with the green roof. The land that was mine. The legacy Ruth and Rebecca had left me. We drove back to the farm in a caravan. FBI vehicles, Howard's truck. Mabel's car, Virgil, riding with Claire. The morning sun was fully up now, warm on my face through the window. By the time we got back, the FBI had turned the property into a crime scene. They were excavating the barn ruins, collecting evidence, documenting everything. "We're going to be here for days," Santos told me. "Weeks, probably, processing the scene, going through Ruth's files, building the case against Drake and everyone connected to him." "How many people?" I asked. "Based on the files you uploaded, at least 42 arrests. Drake himself, his 2 enforcers, Chief Matthews, 3 county commissioners, 2 state senators, a federal judge, various business associates, the doctor who changed Ruth's medications." She shook her head. "Your grandmother built a RECO case. racketeer-influenced, and corrupt organizations. She documented a criminal enterprise that's been operating for 3 decades. Will it stick the case? With what we have, absolutely. Drake's going away for life. Multiple life sentences. So are most of the others. The FBI stayed for 3 days systematically processing everything. They found more than even Ruth had documented in her hidden room. Financial records buried in Drake's company servers showing bribes to 17 different government officials. Employment records for his security contractors that traced back to 3 different murder-for-hire schemes operating in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. By the end of the week, 42 people had been arrested. Dylan Drake himself, his 2 enforcers, Chief Matthews, 3 county commissioners, 2 state senators, 1 federal judge, Drake's personal lawyer, his accountant, the doctor who'd changed Ruth's medications, and dozens of others. The news went national. Claire's article in the Portland Tribune was picked up by every major outlet. How a 22-year-old orphan brought down a murder-for-hire ring. I hated the attention. Reporters camped at the end of my driveway. News helicopters flew overhead. My face was on television and newspapers all over the internet, but Claire said it was important. People need to know, she told me one night as we sat on the porch watching another news van park down the road. Not just about Drake, about Ruth, about what one determined woman can do when she refuses to give up. She didn't do it alone, I said quietly. She had help, Virgil keeping records, Mabel supporting her. People in town who knew the truth but were too scared to speak up until now. And now they can speak, because you finished what she started. The trial took 6 months to actually begin, 6 months of depositions, discovery, pre-trial motions. I testified for 3 days telling the story of the 263 letters, the evidence room, the phone call recording where Drake confessed. Dylan Drake sat at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. An orange jumpsuit would have been more appropriate, but defendants get to wear regular clothes in court. He never looked at me, not once during 3 days of testimony. His lawyers tried everything, argued the recordings were inadmissible, claimed Ruth's evidence was circumstantial, suggested I was an unreliable witness with a grudge. But the prosecution had too much. Audio recordings of Drake ordering hits, financial records proving bribes, testimony from 47 families whose loved ones had died suspiciously, and the coup de grace 3 of Drake's former employees who took plea deals in exchange for testimony. They described in detail how Drake's organization worked, how targets were selected, how deaths were staged, how evidence was destroyed. When the verdict came back, the courtroom was packed. Families of victims, journalists, curious onlookers. Me sitting in the front row with Claire, Mabel, Virgil, and Howard. The jury foreman stood. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. 47 guilty verdicts, 1 for each victim. The judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. Mr. Drake, she said, her voice hard, you used your wealth and power to corrupt institutions that are meant to protect people. You destroyed families, poisoned communities, and killed anyone who stood in your way. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. That is the minimum justice owed to your victims. Drake's face never changed. Even as they led him away, he looked calm, unrepentant. But it didn't matter. He was gone, locked away forever. Chief Matthews got 25 years for his role in the conspiracy and for falsifying my adoption records. The others got between 5 and 20 years each, depending on their level of involvement. 47 families finally got justice. I stood outside the courthouse when it was all over. December now, cold. Snow on the ground. Claire beside me. Mabel and Virgil and Howard behind me. And in front of me, a crowd of people I'd never met. Families of Drake's victims. They'd all come for the verdict. An elderly woman stepped forward. She must have been 80, leaning on a cane. My son was the 4th one, she said, her voice shaking. 1996. They said his truck ran off the road. But I knew. A mother knows. She reached out and took my hand. Thank you. Thank you for giving him justice after 28 years. Others came forward, one by one, thanking me, hugging me, crying. A man my age whose father had died in a farming accident in 2005. A woman whose sister had drowned in 2012. A teenager whose grandmother had died of a heart attack in 2019, the same doctor who'd changed Ruth's medications. 47 families. And I'd helped give them all justice. That night, I drove out to the Willowbrook Cemetery. It was dark, cold snow falling softly. I found my mother's grave first. The flowers were fresh. I'd been coming every week since the trial ended. Mabel came with me sometimes. We'd tell Rebecca about the trial, about the arrests, about justice finally being served. "Hi, Mom," I said, kneeling in the snow. My jeans got wet immediately, but I didn't care. "The trial's over. Dylan Drake got 3 life sentences. He'll die in prison. He'll never hurt anyone again." The wind rustled through the bare trees. "I wish you could see what we built. The farm is beautiful now. We rebuilt the barn red paint just like before. I've got the apple orchard producing again. Mabel taught me to make your apple butter recipe. It sells out every week at the farmer's market." I placed a white rose on her grave. "Claire and I, we're together now. She's amazing, strong and brave, and she makes me laugh. I think you would have liked her." I touched the headstone. "We're getting married next spring. I'm going to wear your ring, the one Ruth saved for me." Tears froze on my cheeks. "You died fighting for what's right, and 22 years later your daughter finished the fight. I hope that means something. I hope you can rest now." I moved to Ruth's grave next door. The headstone I'd installed with settlement money from the Drake Industries bankruptcy. Ruth Henderson, 1951-2025. She never gave up on love. "Hi, Grandma," I said, settling cross-legged in the snow. "I brought you something." I pulled out the music box from my bag, wound it up and set it on her grave. For Elise played Fragile Notes in the winter night. They convicted him today. All 47 counts. Everything you documented, everything you fought for, it all mattered. The FBI said your evidence was the most comprehensive civilian investigation they'd ever seen. They're using it as a model for teaching investigators how to document organized crime. The music box wound down. I wound it again. I read all 263 letters, every single one. Some of them I've read 10 times, 20 times. You wrote like you knew me, Grandma. Like you loved me even though we'd never met. And I felt it. I feel it every day. My voice broke. "I wish you'd lived long enough to meet me. I wish I could have hugged you just once. Told you thank you for never giving up. For writing those letters even when they came back. For building that case even when it seemed hopeless. For leaving me everything." I pulled out a photograph, the one from the music box, Ruth, Rebecca, and baby me, 3 generations together. I'd had it laminated to protect it from the snow. "I'm having this framed. It's going on the mantle. So every day when I come home, I'll see us, all 3 of us, the Henderson women." The wind picked up, carrying flakes of snow that sparkled in the streetlight. "I'm not alone anymore, Grandma. I have Mabel and Virgil and Howard. I have Claire. I'm going to marry her. Did I tell you that I have a whole town full of people who remember you, who loved you, who've been teaching me how to be part of a community?" I stood up, brushed snow from my jeans. "I'm going to make you proud. Both of you. I'm living on the land, growing food." The Henderson Farm Youth Program started last month. We're teaching kids aging out of foster care how to farm, giving them job skills, showing them they have value. 12 kids in the first session. Emma graduated yesterday. She's staying on as an assistant instructor. I touched both headstones. I wish you could see it, the house with its white walls and green roof, the barn we rebuilt, the fields coming back to life, the orchard producing again. It's everything you wanted it to be. The music box stopped. I didn't wind it again. "Thank you," I said to the graves, to the snow, to the night sky. "Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for loving me when I didn't know I was loved. Thank you for leaving me a home." I walked back to my truck, the used Ford I'd bought with settlement money. Claire was waiting, engine running, heat on. "You okay?" she asked as I climbed in. I looked back at the cemetery, at the 2 graves side by side, at the music box sitting in the snow, silent now. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." We drove back to the farm, past fields sleeping under snow, past the rebuilt barn, red paint bright even in darkness, past the orchard, bare branches waiting for spring. The house came into view, lights on in the windows, smoke from the chimney. Mabel's car in the driveway. She was making dinner, had promised to teach me how to make tamales. Through the window, I could see her moving around the kitchen. Virgil and Harold were on the porch fixing a loose board even in the cold, because that's what they did. Fixed things, helped. A community, a family. Not by blood well, except for the blood I shared with the 2 women buried in the cemetery, but by choice. Claire reached over and squeezed my hand. "Home," she said. I looked at the bracelet on my wrist, my mother's bracelet. At the ring on a chain around my neck. Ruth had saved it, but I wore it there until the wedding. At the house full of people who'd chosen to love me. Yeah, I said softly. Home. The farm in June was unrecognizable from the abandoned property I'd inherited 6 months ago. We'd rebuilt the barn bright red paint gleaming in the summer sun. Inside, instead of evidence rooms and hidden passages, we'd created a workshop space. Tables and tools and equipment for teaching. The Henderson Farm Youth Program. 12 kids came that first session. All of them aging out of foster care. All of them with nowhere to go and no one to help them. We taught them farming. How to grow food, raise chickens, care for land, carpentry and basic mechanics, financial literacy, how to apply for jobs, how to rent an apartment, how to navigate the world that didn't care about kids like us. But more than that, we taught them they mattered, that they had value, that someone believed in them. I taught the morning sessions. Claire handled afternoons. She'd taken a job as a journalism teacher at the community college in Missoula, but she lived here with me in Ruth's house, our house now. Mabel provided meals. She showed up every day at noon with food, taught the kids to cook, told them stories about Ruth and Rebecca, about women who fought. Virgil taught woodworking. Harold showed them how to build and fix things. Other people from town started volunteering too. The woman who ran the hardware store taught basic plumbing. The retired nurse showed them first aid. The town had rallied around us, around Ruth's memory, around the idea that we could help kids who'd been forgotten by everyone else. The first graduate was a girl named Emma, 19, red hair like mine, eyes that had seen too much too young. On her last day, she pulled me aside. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me that family doesn't have to be blood, that people can choose to care." I thought about Ruth and Rebecca, about the 3 generations of Henderson women connected by love across time and death, about Mabel and Virgil and Claire and Howard and everyone else who'd chosen to be family. "No," I said, hugging her. "Sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into, because it's built on love, not obligation." That evening, after the last student left, I walked to the cemetery like I did every week. The graves were side by side, flowers fresh on both. I'd planted perennials around them, wildflowers that would come back every year without tending. "Hi, Grandma. Hi, Mom." I settled onto the grass between them. "Big news, we graduated our first student today. Emma. She got a job at the hardware store in town. She's staying in Willowbrook. Says she finally found a place that feels like home." A hawk circled overhead, calling out, "We're expanding the program. 20 kids next session, maybe 30 by fall. The settlement money from Drake Industries is paying for most of it. Seems right that his money should go toward fixing what he broke." I pulled out my phone, showed the graves a photo, even though that was ridiculous. Emma at graduation, holding her certificate, smiling so wide, it looked like her face might break. Claire and I set a date, September 15th, here on the farm, in front of the house. Howard's going to officiate. Turns out he got licensed as an officiant years ago, did Ruth's wedding to Grandpa. I touched both headstones. "I wish you could be there, both of you, but I feel you anyway, in the house, in the land, in every sunrise, in every letter, and every moment when I remember I'm not alone." The sun was setting, that same impossible sky Ruth had written about in her letters, pink and orange and gold bleeding together. I came here 6 months ago with $15 and a backpack. I thought I had nothing. I thought I was nobody. I stood up, looked at the White House in the distance, at the red barn, at the fields green with crops, at the orchard heavy with young apples. But I found 263 letters. I found a grandmother who loved me from a distance. I found a mother's courage in my own blood. Found a community that became family. I found purpose in home, in love. The hawk cried out again, wheeling in the sky. I found everything. I walked back to the truck. Claire was waiting, engine off this time, sitting on the hood watching the sunset. "Ready?" she asked. I looked back one last time, at the graves, at the flowers, at the music box I'd left there, weatherproof now, that would play Fur Elise whenever someone wound it, at the town beyond where people knew my name, where I belonged, at the sky painted in Ruth's colors. "Yeah," I said, "let's go home." We drove back as the last light faded, past the orchard where Ruth had planted trees 40 years ago, past the fields where she'd grown vegetables and raised her daughter, past the land she'd fought for, died for, left for Marty, to the house with white walls and a green roof, to the place where 3 generations of Henderson women had loved and fought and refused to give up, to the home I'd built from ashes and letters and the fierce love of a grandmother I never met. Home, finally completely home.